Hello and welcome again to another edition of the Osteopathic Lyceum podcast. I'm going to speak to the idea of accuracy and recognition uh, in what I think is a bit of a combined way, or at least I hope is a bit of a combined way. I will start by relating this to some of the discussions that I've heard with respect to regulation in osteopathy, especially in Ontario, but in Canada more broadly. Some of the terminology, some of the concept is something that I've heard from people from other jurisdictions or internationally. This idea of recognition. So I can't say explicitly that there is a desire for other entities outside of osteopathy to quote unquote recognize osteopathy for a sense or a feeling of validation of the profession. I can't say that explicitly, but it seems as though that's the general direction of the motivation. So then again, because I can't be absolutely bedrock firm or bedrock solid or accurate about where the motivation is coming from for many people or many organizations, but just at least the term recognition, it would intone an external validation, right? So, or a motivation to the external world. Now, obviously, these are really broad things because a whole profession trying to have external validation is kind of odd because the profession is made up of individuals. So the individuals will have varying locus of control, right? So a locus of control is essentially where a particular individual may be described as believing control exists, either inside of them or outside of them. Psychologically, as a term, the locus of control or an internal locus of control, we'll start with, is that description that points to an individual who believes that their choices will and actions will impact their outcomes, whereas those with an external locus of control would be described as believing that their actions and choices have little to no outcome on their, or little to no impact on their outcomes, rather, such that it is those outside of them that have the control over their outcomes. Now, if the general term that I've heard in the form of recognition is pointing in the direction that I think it is, then it is suggesting at least an institutional external locus of control or an organizational external locus of control, as opposed to the fundamental belief with respect to regulation. The fundamental assumption of a regulatory act is that the public needs to be protected from the practitioner. Osteopathy seems to, especially in a hands-on form, have an exceptionally low risk profile. One of the reasons it has an exceptionally low risk profile is because of the barrier concept that I describe as don't make them say ouch, or a central belief that the way that you interact with another human being in a healthcare setting is to avoid engaging protective responses. That puts you in a much stronger realm of safety. You're less likely to do things fast enough that if something was going to break or tear, that it would, because you're going at a speed that is slow enough that you'd be able to stop before, or the patient would be able to stop you before you got there. The movement at a generally slower pace, or bringing force on at a slower pace, allows for the avoidance of resistance that could also predict more soreness. It could predict more opportunities for breaks and tears, right? So we're not doing those things. We also don't break skin, right? So the general practice of osteopathic manual therapy in not breaking skin doesn't introduce external pathogens above and beyond almost any form of other human interaction, right? So the safety profile is very high. Some of the mechanistic beliefs and some of the practices that they guide mean that you're probably going to do nothing, right? You're probably going to move so slow, or in such a micro fashion that really nothing noticeable would happen in the moment. And any therapeutic benefit is just the time not doing much, right? That's at least a possibility. Now, there's no need to throw specific negativity towards any system. I think I do that enough in my own way, trying to maintain some professionalism, but it's not going to help make a point here. So osteopathy is very safe. It then belies the normal assumption of a regulatory process that osteopathic practitioners tend to be a danger to the public. Now, if you go into jurisdictions where osteopathic practitioners are allowed to do HVLA or high velocity, low amplitude thrust, you have introduced danger, right? If you can crack things, there is danger. You are moving at a rate of speed where you could break or tear things. So that becomes understandable. In Canada, that's a protected act. So there is no osteopathic practitioner that should be doing any form of HVLA. It just should not be happening. Which means that because we're outside of those protected acts that osteopathic practitioners in other jurisdictions may engage in, we are not a danger to the public because we're not legally allowed to do that thing. If you introduce nutritional counseling, then it's at least possible that under your guidance that you could cause a person to eat in a way that could lead to downstream effects that could be considered medically negative, right? We can't do that in Canada. Therefore, our risk profile is exceptionally low. If you want to add those things in, then you have to add in a lot of knowledge. When you're adding that knowledge in, you also have to assume that you understand it well enough that you could deliver it effectively. Or you have to grab somebody who already knows it, and then they're going to try to train you as if you were doing that full course, right? So my general suggestion would be, if you want to talk about nutrition and you're a hands-on practitioner, become a nutritionist, full-blown nutritionist. You can then have two completely separate skill sets that you could apply to the same person under separate auspices or separate contexts. Same goals, but they're separate skill sets. Don't try to integrate them. The saying of Dr. Still in Research and Practice, the house of osteopathy is only big enough for osteopathy. Anything else that moves in, just that much osteopathy must move out. It can sound really hard line. I think it may be more accurate to say that it's a proper description of developing a skill. If there is a skill that has a boundary, if you're trying to do other things outside of that boundary at the same time, then essentially you're pulling attention. So your perception is going to be skewed. Your attention is going to be skewed, which then will impact your delivery of skill. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't know anything about nutrition or you couldn't know anything about nutrition, but if you want to do nutrition, do nutrition. Don't do osteopathy and nutrition at the same time. Do osteopathy, then nutrition for a particular individual. Do nutrition, then osteopathy for a particular individual. Separate these things out. If you wanted to include psychology, don't, right? You make somebody dangerous if you don't give them a full course or a full amount of training to be legally allowed to interface with another human being in the psychological realm. And even then, there are known pitfalls, there are known problems. So please be very careful with the desire to add these things in. Just because you think that you're going to supercharge your results for people with respect to adding in this other service doesn't mean you should, doesn't mean you're going to be skilled enough, doesn't mean you're going to be skilled enough to know when you're screwing up, right? So then it does do a decent job with what Dr. Still's saying. Anything else that moves into the house of osteopathy, just that much osteopathy must move out, right? Be good at something, deliver that thing. Be very careful of the desire to bring other things in. You know, a little drop here, a little drop there. Just be cautious. Your skill set will be questionable in those other things. And it's like you're just trying to grab something for the sake of grabbing it because you can't figure it out. Or you're unwilling to admit that you, as an individual practitioner, are not going to be the thing that solves the problem this person's come to you with. But that's okay. There are boundaries to all skills. There are boundaries to all things. Accept that, and maybe things could be generally more positive. I'm not 100% sure, but I've got a pretty good idea that you want to be cautious with stuff like this. So, okay, To come back to locus of control, if you need a government to regulate you for any reason other than you being a danger to the general public, then it is suggesting institutionally and organizationally that you believe you have an external locus of control. That's just foolish, right? You're trying to engage a process on another axis than it's built for. So you're misusing the process of regulation. Wanting somebody to clap for you and say that you're okay, or even say that you're dangerous, kind of seems foolish to me. Now, not everybody's going to agree. Obviously, the answer is that's fine. I'm sharing this so that I can have record of this and that other people may be able to consider what I'm saying. The general move of those with an external locus of control, or maybe a better way to describe it, that some people will feel sounds harsh and other people maybe will grab onto. It's kind of like a victim mentality. It's somebody else's fault that you're not getting this thing. An assumption also, if you want to take a profession that is showing it is not dangerous and regulate it, is that you can show that the amount of extra administration and the cost associated with that will have a return for the people going into a profession. I will say this very, very generally. Osteopathic practitioners are not necessarily exceptionally high earners. If you want people to go into a regulated profession, you've got to have a really, really good belief that these people are going to earn a certain amount of money to make it worth their while to deal with the administrative hassle of regulation. You've got to make the case that you're not going to hit a saturation point in the market, that these people are delivering a unique enough service that they're going to be attractive to the population. You're also going to have to assume, you're basically going to have to assume that without much effort, these people are going to get busy enough to be paying things back that they have accrued through the process of education. That's not necessarily the case with osteopathy. Lots of people earn very good livings. Many of those people are charismatic. Many of those people are happy to network. They, as individuals, probably have an internal locus of control. They believe that if they go out and they generally meet the public, that it will have an impact on their success with respect to the business of healthcare. Not everybody's comfortable with the concept of the business of healthcare. There are different models. You can do percent splits. These are all options. But if you regulate a profession, you're adding administrative burden, you're likely adding financial burden. It's not necessarily going to pay off, right? It's a bit of a challenge, okay? So we've got internal locus of control versus external locus of control. The move towards the desire for regulation for recognition seems much more like an external locus of control. It's somebody else's fault that people don't know who I am. Not really. You could just get better at allowing the general public to know that you exist, finding different ways to do that, and also finding ways to do that that speaks to them instead of speaks to your current core audience. It's a very, very rare individual in the general public that doesn't know what osteopathy is already, who's going to care about things like the claims of the primary respiratory mechanism, the visceral axes. And I'm saying things that I will dismiss because they're easily identifiable as claims that don't match reality in the way that they are claimed. I could say that a different way, but again, it would just be harsh. So the general public doesn't care about your mechanisms. They don't care about any of that stuff, which means that your personal desire to have this level of accuracy, maybe to please your educator, doesn't necessarily impact how the general public's going to view you, other than it could attract some and it could turn a lot off. The other deal is that it doesn't improve your clinical effectiveness. Efficacy is in a lab, basically. Effectiveness is in the real world. So I want to try to use the right term. Your clinical effectiveness is not improved by you accurately guessing an exact piece of anatomy that you can't see, right? So I've made the argument about the variance in anatomy. I'm still working on that project uh, with respect to assaying varying sources and seeing how often they agree on the exact same topic, which isn't really all that often. So you then know from resources that even the resources don't agree. So how the heck are you as a practitioner who isn't able to cut bodies open going to be completely accurate, or have access to imaging going to be completely accurate about the claim that you're making? So this idea of being pinpoint accurate in the technique that you're using on the specific piece of anatomy that you're targeting, as opposed to just paying attention to the individual who's in front of you and seeing how they're responding, right? The thing that I tend to try to advocate for to my students is that your level of accuracy is, did you find something that wasn't moving? Did you interface with it in a way that was respectful to how the person responded to what you were doing when you were doing it? And if it wasn't the direction that you needed to go, did you change and find the one that they responded to most in the direction of your goals? And then did it move better? If you can satisfy those criteria, you've done your job exceptionally well. It may not give you the thing that you wanted to give you, or that may not give the patient the thing they wanted to give them. So I tend to advocate for judging on the mechanical side, the observable mechanical side. Was it not moving? Is it moving better? If it's moving better, you did your job to the best of your ability. If you made them say ouch, you didn't do it to the best of your ability, aka you made them protect themselves. If you didn't make them say ouch, you did it to the best of your ability. If you then, as an individual practitioner, are judging based on the words the patient says back to you about how they feel, then you're judging on a highly knowably variable scale, even within the same person. How they report how they feel in one moment may be very different than how they report in a different moment, for a variety of reasons, none of which will indicate that you did a bad job, right? Sometimes we won't agree on the scale, but if you judge yourself on a scale where the results could be all over the place, knowably all over the place, even if on another scale it went the perfect direction, then you're allowing yourself to judge yourself based on weather, right? It goes up, it goes down, it goes left, it goes right, it goes forwards, it goes backwards, it does all kinds of things, and you're not going to be able to predict it exceptionally well. If you judge yourself on how things were found to be moving and how they have changed since your intervention, then you will have something that is more consistent as far as something that can be observably be related, or not related, measured. Better term, proper term. I don't know why that happened. If I knew why that happened, it wouldn't have happened. Would have got ahead of it. Anyways, so I'm advocating much more for an internal locus of control with respect to how you judge your work, an internal locus of control for how you view how the world views you. How the world views you is much more about how you conduct yourself in relation to the world than it is about all those other factors. Now, all those other factors, the general momentum of a given profession, the biggest talking heads and how they talk about the profession, will have an impact on how the public views you. That's true. But you can overcome that by how you interact with the public. So I'm advocating generally for a more internal locus of control approach to the profession, especially when the safety profile is excellent. So for one, I think it's pretty obvious I'm not all that concerned if having a regulatory structure makes other people feel better about how other people view them. I kind of could care less. I would generally advocate for you behaving well, doing a good job, not saying wacko things to the general public. You don't know that they're wacko things, but they're wacko things, right? So I then have to acknowledge and recognize that if people do not know that the things that they're saying are not all that accurate, all that high level, all that reasonable, if you don't know that, then I sound like a jerk. If you do know that, then maybe I don't sound so crazy. The other deal is that if somebody does have the psychological profile of an external locus of control, what I'm asking or what I'm advocating for may be unreasonable to them as individuals. There are solutions to that. You don't have to have an external locus, or sorry, an internal locus of control. You could work with somebody who does, and then they will bring you along with them. That's clinically, as far as clinical business is concerned, where you would attach yourself to somebody who's highly motivated in an internal locus of control fashion, and you would do a percent split with them, something like that, right? So if you recognize that you're lacking in not lacking, if you're built in a particular way that is going to make it harder for you to do certain things, then you make a relationship with people who can do that thing that you're not that good at, right? So I recognize that not everybody's going to move towards an internal locus of control. I recognize that if you have a profession full of people with an external locus of control, then you're more likely to have the momentum in that direction. I can still think it's a less effective direction, but whatever. So hopefully some of that ramble, some of that made sense. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you learned something. We'll talk again soon.